All right, so I am here with Ben Looms, the famous Ben Looms from Syrinscape, who is joining me from PAX Australia. He's actually taken a little break to come and talk to me today, so thank you so much for doing that. I know you're so busy at the moment, so I really appreciate it.
It's been a fun day setting up for PAX, and I'm back in my hotel room after nothing going horribly wrong. So things have turned up and things have plugged in and the power was there and the walls were there. So it's always a good con setup when that happens.
Fantastic. That's always the best scenario in these kinds of things. So I'm really happy for you. Okay, cool. So let's start off then with a little intro. So there might be some people watching who've never actually heard of Syrinscape, or maybe have seen Syrinscape or a bit on the fence about, oh, should I get it, should I not get it? So can you tell them what makes Syrinscape the sound accessory for games?
Yeah, so Syrinscape is a really super simple to use app specifically designed for me at my table to make running environmental sound and music really super easy. So I was running sort of YouTube videos and things like that and CDs and running into the whole problems of them not being customizable and repeating themselves. And yeah, Syrinscape's kind of a one-click solution to a horrific non-repeating, gorgeous, rich dragon battle, and then another click that there's an aftermath sound with just the sound of crackling buildings and weeping men, and then sort of another click and you go into the tavern. So it's really, really light and easy to use, but creates fully immersive sort of theatrical sound and in a gorgeous way.
Okay, and some people might be a little bit daunted by, okay, I've got to set up something else as well alongside, say, my miniatures or my notes. So, you know, what can you tell us about the app that's seamless? Because I have looked at it, I've looked at little bits of it. So, you know, for somebody who's never used anything like this at all, you know, what have you done to make it seamless?
Yeah, so if you could have this sitting on your iPad, it works on iOS or Android tabs, and you could just have that sitting on your table. It's built with a really sort of fantastic, immersive kind of fantasy styling. It looks like a sort of a wooden object with vines. And really, you just reach over every now and then, every time you go from having the dragon battle to having the aftermath to then going to the tavern, which is maybe one click every 45 minutes or something, the way role-playing games work. Just reach over and click that word on your sound set. If you then go to the kobold caves, you know, you might just quickly type in kobold into the search field and up comes the kobold sound set, and then you click general ambience and click that, and then it just transitions completely smoothly with a crossfade. So that can just sit on a tablet on your table, or if you're using a laptop to do stats and things like that, just flick over to Syrinscape and bring it in the foreground and just give it a click and then move on. We often even have a player doing the DJing for the Dungeon Master. If you're a newer Dungeon Master, and yes, us Dungeon Masters operate on overload basically, so if the thought of adding something extra to the table makes it seem daunting, then yeah, get a player to run it for you. So if you say you arrive at the Kobold Tavern, then that's pretty easy. Kobold Tavern, I like the sound of that. That's pretty easy for them just to bring that up and click it. And yeah, look, the huge benefit from having that movie soundtrack turned on and that incredibly immersive, emotive content playing well outweighs and that sort of the extra attention it takes. And of course, if we're describing scenes with our words, then there's a whole lot of words you don't need to say if the sounds are already describing all that to the players. So yeah, well worth a try.
Yeah, awesome. And as a musician myself, thank you so much for the crossfade.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I'm forever pulling up in my car and my family laughs at me because I refuse to sort of turn off the radio and turn off the ignition until we get to sort of the appropriate cadence, or I have to sort of fade it out or whatever, because that's one of my real bugbears. And yeah, if you're running a YouTube video, then you just have to sort of chop it off straight like that. And yeah, the crossfade is super, super important to make it smooth and seamless.
Yeah, exactly. But let's talk on the musician bit for a minute. So, of course, you yourself are a musician as well, and you studied composition and music at Sydney University.
That's right.
So in terms of Syrinscape forming after that, did that come fairly naturally? Was that something that you thought about at university, or was it an idea that came about later on?
Yeah, I've often thought about how, why I was the one to have done it. I think it's that unique combination of an actual gamer, like I was a serious gamer. I started with that red box in, getting it for maybe my 11th birthday or something like that. Super, super exciting, and rubbing the crayon into the numbers of the dice so you could read it. So I was an actual gamer. I was also kind of a techie nerd, so I was doing a bit of amateur computer programming. And then, yeah, as you said, I was a musician, pianist, and a singer, singing opera and studying composition at uni. So when I was in kind of my early 20s playing, at the gaming table and in silence, it just seemed really, really weird to me. I mean, when we go to movies, we have those emotive soundtracks cueing us emotionally, and we have those environmental sounds in movies where you have skittering of bugs at a barely sort of perceptible level, where you don't say, "Oh, I feel tense because I hear the foreboding sound of many skittering legs." You know, you don't sort of necessarily even consciously note that, but it has a profound effect on us. So it seemed natural for me to want to have sound, and I just literally looked around for something to do it, you know, an app to do it, and a lot of what I found was actually taking me out of immersion because the quality wasn't there, or the crossfades weren't good, or the sounds were too repetitive, or sort of many reasons. So I just hacked together something, you know, using Python, which was a programming language that I liked, which was straightforward to write in and had some cool plugins, and was just using it at my table. And then I shared it on the internet as freeware and as donationware, in fact, and people were like, "Oh my God, it's so amazing." And then sort of Syrinscape was birthed out of that. Wow. Does that answer your question? That was a long-winded.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's nice to sort of see the development as well, and obviously it's now this extremely refined app that so many people are using, which is great.
Yes, it wasn't when I first wrote it, and it was just barely functional for me to use the table myself.
No, but as you said, people still loved it, so that's great.
Yeah.
So with the actual process of, say, making each track, you know, for Syrinscape, when you get new ones, you know, coming into the table, is it all sort of following the same process, or do you change things depending on, oh, okay, I've come up with this idea or this music, you know, is there any kind of difference to that?
It's a fascinating question. So I'm building the sound sets for Descent into Avernus for Dungeons and Dragons. We have a license with them, which has just been amazing for us. We've got sounds already out for Dragon Heist, and Lost Mine of Phandelve is a good one to try out, and for Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So Avernus I'm doing at the moment. So you think about sort of your hellscape as one of the places I have to build, obviously. So you think about what are the basic elements that keep going throughout the whole sound environment, which have no sort of remarkable events in them. And obviously the crackling of thunder, the crackling of fire, and sort of the some sort of unsettling hissing of wind. Those sort of three elements can glue together the whole sound environment. And then you think about what events might happen occasionally in a scattered random fashion. So you might pick up some big cracks of thunder, maybe some spiritually disturbing sort of subliminal hisses. And so you make an element that just does hisses, and it picks a random hiss every now and then and randomly positions it at a random distance and applies some reverb to that and then plays it back. And you do the same for each of sort of the different elements that are in that sound design. And then I think music, especially once I hear that. So for the music for Avernus, I'm super excited because I've got some sort of slightly disturbing pad bass drone notes, which modulate from sort of one key to another in a kind of a modal way. And then I've recorded 37, I think it is, different sort of guitar licks, electric guitar. I'm sort of thinking Mad Max, like sort of a demon noodling on his guitar. And they just play every now and then, like there's sort of just, sort of an electric demon. And that's the soundtrack that you get in the movie. And because in a movie, you can program the sound to match the action exactly, obviously, because you know exactly how many seconds, until they're going to come up over the rise of the mountain or whatever. Syrinscape has to be able to change when the dungeon master decides to then click battle. That improvising guitar then needs to transform into something really hammering with heavy metal drums and actually a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar really fanging it, and then that can't stay at that level all the time, so that has to sort of fade away a little bit and then allow people to run the battle over the top of it without it becoming overwhelming. So sort of think about the levels of sound, those basic bottom levels, and then the events that happen, and then the music laid on top of that.
Wow, okay. So I had no idea actually that you had the same music, as it were, could be used for different encounters and different events, and you just take layers off. That's amazing. I wasn't sure if you just had to kind of change to something more appropriate, but that's amazing. It really gives DMs the freedom, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important that you can transition the sound and craft it. You can ramp up the tension gradually, and once again, it all has to be subliminal. So when you're watching a movie, you never think, oh, the trombones played a tritone, I think that woman in the shower is in danger, and you don't think, oh my God, there's sort of violins playing in chromatic clusters, that's why it's a bad thing she's being stabbed, but absolutely you perceive that in your emotional state, and often, I'm sure you've done it. If you watch a horror movie, for instance, without any sound at all, it often jumps quite quickly from being quite horrible to looking absurd and laughable. And so that music sort of bypasses that conscious ability to manage our own emotions and sort of pumps them right into us straight away. So it's super important that these things aren't noticed. You know, you're not thinking, oh, that's the 17th time in a row I heard the crow go caw, caw, woof, you know, with the dog straight after it. You can't have those patterns reoccurring. So it all has to be randomly spread and really variable and controllable by the Dungeon Master.
Brilliant. Okay. And you talk a lot about social gaming. And this is sort of part of why Syrinscape exists, really. And of course, playing music in general as well as a very social activity. There's a lot of collaboration, teamwork, and all that. So for you, what's the most memorable experience of sort of a fusion of gaming and music that you've ever encountered or you've experienced?
I think it's probably the most memorable, and then I'll add a little anecdote after, which I love telling. Probably the best one so far is the games at the Descent event, the D&D live event in LA recently, where we had, you know, wonderful role players up on stage improvising together, and a great crowd of devoted fans who were fully engaged in a room which was dressed and lit, you know, to the max. And then I was able to sit there DJing, crafting music and sound to match the stories that these DMs and players were telling. And when it starts to feed backwards and forwards, you know, when you sense a dungeon master going in a certain direction, and then you can add a layer of music underneath it just to really bed that emotion in. And then, you know, the players actually sort of stop for a moment and go, oh, or comment or whatever. And then you can, something madcap happens and someone trips over and stabs himself with a sword, and you can trigger a Wilhelm scream or something.
Oh, brilliant.
And you get a big laugh. You get a big laugh from the crowd. So I'm always looking for those sorts of things when I'm DJing these big live events, which is, super fun. And then the other one is at my own table, probably my most favorite event of all time, which I tell quite frequently to people. There's an adventure, and you go into this abandoned house, and you're supposed to go upstairs because all the level appropriate encounters for where you are at the moment are upstairs. And then after you get the XP, you're supposed to go down this hole, and there's these quite terrible monsters who will tear your face off if you go down there too early. And my players are sort of, you know, tempted by this hole in the floor and looking over, and I just reach over and sort of touch a big scary roar sound, and they're looking, and there's this and they just go, we decide to go back to town and become florists. And it's just so wonderful. It's like, wow, that's so cool. You definitely do not want to go near this creature with the large voice. And that was super cool.
Yeah. I was going to say, actually, with the DJing events, if you want to call them that, is it very much improvisatory? Do you get any kind of plan that you can go with? Or do you find the players take it off track anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any exposure of planning to normal players has shown everyone that planning is almost pointless. Yeah, I generally get like 5 sentences. It's an Alice in Wonderland has a flying spaceship crash into her house adventure. You know, so I've got some sound sets available, but I really rely on that search function. So somehow insects suddenly come into it, so you just frantically type in insects and bring up some of the elements that'll play, you know, swarm of insects and some individual flies and things, and then suddenly I'm starting those. So it really is really improvisatory, because that's just the way role-playing games are. You know, you never know where it's going to go, and the best dungeon masters incorporate the ideas of the players as we run along, and that's super important and lots of fun, and keeps the adrenaline pumping.
Yeah, I bet it does. Okay, then. So say we've got a DM that they're not doing any kind of module; they're doing something more homebrew. So they're using their own sort of soundscapes that they've got sort of amalgamated. So say they've got players that always go off track; they're never sort of sticking to the encounters. What tips can you give them with your app to kind of get rid of any stress of, oh, I've made this amazing soundscape for this encounter, but they don't even turn up to it, type thing?
Yeah, that's right. Well, so you basically just type into that search field. So if you type tavern into the top of the left-hand column above all the sound sets. Okay, so sorry. Presuming you've got access to everything, which you need a subscription to do. There's some free stuff that comes with Syrinscape, or you can buy some things. And that's good, but that makes it harder because you're obviously already automatically limiting, what you've actually got available out of the 450 sound sets that are in there or whatever. But say you've got a subscription, you're maybe trying the 30-month free trial, I should mention that, which you can do. You type in tavern, you'll get seedy tavern, friendly tavern, and then just a couple of other ones. And, you just match where the players have decided to walk into, and you just click, is it, and you look down the list of moods, and is it busy drinking? Is it a quiet chat in the corner? Or is it a warm spot by the fire? And you just click that button, and that's it. You don't worry about it anymore, because Syrinscape will just move into that mode. If then, they decide to go and attack the goblins, and you type in goblins, and there will be a couple of goblin sound sets there that have goblins involved in them. And you just look down the list and hit the thing that's most appropriate. And if you somehow someone summons a red dragon or something because they decided that was going to be fair, you type in red dragon, and then you've got the red dragon sound set. So it really is actually set up specifically for Dungeon Masters to make that job easily. And that's basically because I have to deal with my own players who are very much like that. And I think that's why it works. I think that's why it has been a success, is because it's actually made by a gamer for my own needs and my own desperate requirements. So
Brilliant.
So just use the search field. Also, one more thing I would say is that sound is very abstract, and it's more an emotional level. For instance, any large creature will have a voice which can be easily covered by a red dragon's roar. In much the way you just restat the monsters in Adventure. You just take the stats for a manticore, and that can be, a level appropriate counter for any creature that's basically mainly going to rely on physical attacks with no fancy magic things. And if you turn on the manticore sound set or the red dragon sound set, it's going to be good enough for any large creature. An owlbear or anything of kind of large stats. If you've got little pixies, they suddenly attack, and you bought yourself the goblin sound set. Well, goblins are going to be going, which is that's going to be fine for pixies too. As sound is quite abstractable, and our brains will accept the music that's kind of near enough, it's good enough.
Cool. Okay. And speaking of red dragons and red box, because I know that you mentioned that red box was what you started out with in the 80s. So I know you've got your sort of D&D 5e modules you're working on at the moment, but is there any sort of red box, or say your absolute favorite module? Are we going to see a soundscape for that?
We played the choose your own adventure kind of style red box adventure the other day with my own gaming group, and we all pretended to be like kind of 11 again. And I was, as the dungeon master, I was only allowed to read from the box text or give answers that came from the expanding text that was available around it. And it was hilarious. And it's never really occurred to me to build sound sets for them, but that would actually be super, super cool. Because that adventure is just absolutely burnt in my memory as the first exposure and the first opening blossoming of the possibility of these fantasy worlds. That cleric that you have to sort of save, and the magic mouth that asks the riddle, and it's all so central into my sort of the way I think about fantasy role playing. That'd be super, super fun. You've got my imagination going there.
What have I done?
That's right. Because we often trigger some of the NPCs dialogue in Syrinscape, so if Dungeon Masters like that sort of thing, they can actually use the pre-recorded dialogue. For instance, Xanathar in Dragon Heist is recorded by Chris Perkins, which is totally amazing.
Oh, wow, okay.
So you can actually have the sort of one of the official makers, his version of Xanathar. I often use them to remind me of what the heck the accent is, and to cast that kind of accent into the mind of the players and the vocal tone, and then I continue if the conversation becomes more abstract than what you can respond to with yes and no and maybe and I don't understand. Then I just continue going. So we could do the magic mouth lines, which would be super, super cool.
Wow.
So,
Got me thinking now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking part in this today, from one convention to another. So thank you so much. We're going to be giving away a couple of your subscriptions, which we'll talk about a bit after this. Of course, live when this goes out in a couple of days' time. But once again, thank you for all your support and for Syrinscape.
Yeah, and you can download the app for free to try. You don't even have to register or anything like that. And then, buy a few things or grab that 30-day trial subscription. You just Google for that and it'll come up, and give it a try, and jump on the forums and give us some feedback and keep growing the community and growing what Syrinscape's doing for people.
Wonderful. Well, have a fantastic time at PAX. Hopefully see you soon.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks a lot. It was lovely talking to you. Hi, my name is Ben Looms. I'm the CEO and Creative Director of Syrinscape, and I just encourage all of you to get behind and support the Butterfly Project. They're an amazing group that's bringing gaming to kids in Uganda. And more gaming, more experience, more drama, the better.